The fourth, just as within a body is the inclination to expand for its growth and development, and since it is from within, the inclination to expand is being perfected for the body. Whereas, if it is an inclination for expansion from outside it, it is to rip the body's skin, to destroy it. It is not expansion. In the same way, when the inclination to expand and will to interpret the law were present in those within the sphere of Islam through the door of perfect taqwa and the way of conforming to the essential teachings of Islam, like the righteous early generations, that was a perfection and being perfected. But if such an inclination and desire come from those who give up the essentials, prefer the life of this world to that of the hereafter, and are tainted with materialist philosophy, it is the means of destroying the body of Islam and casting off the chain of the Sharia from the neck. The fifth, 3 points of view make interpretation of the law earthly at this time and prevent it from being heavenly. Whereas the Sharia is heavenly, revealed, and since interpretations of it make known its hidden ordinances, they are also heavenly. The first, the wisdom of an ordinance is one thing, while the reason for it is something different. Wisdom and benefit are the cause of its choice, not the means of its being necessitated and created. And the reason is the means for its existence. For example, the obligatory prayers are shortened while travelling. 2 rakats are performed. The reason for this permission of the Sharia is the journey, while its wisdom is the hardship. If there is the journey but no hardship, the prayers are still shortened, for there is the reason. But if there is no journey, yet hardship, it may not be the reason for shortening the prayers. Thus, contrary to this fact, the view at this time is to set up the benefit and wisdom in place of the reason, and to make its judgment in accordance with that. Such an interpretation is certainly earthly, not heavenly. The second, the view at the present time looks primarily to worldly happiness, whereas the view of the Sharia looks primarily to happiness in the hereafter, and to happiness in this world in second place, and indirectly as the means to the hereafter. That is to say, the view of this time is a stranger to the spirit of the Sharia, in which case it may not make interpretations in its name. The third, there is a rule.
Inna ad-darurati tubihul mahzurat.
Necessity makes permissible what is forbidden. This rule is not universal, so long as it is not by way of what is forbidden. Necessity makes licit what is forbidden. But if something has become a necessity due to abuse and for illicit reasons, this necessity may not be the basis of ordinances permitting it, nor form an excuse. For example, if through ill choice someone makes himself drunk in an unlawful way, according to scholars of the Sharia, his actions act against him, and he may not be counted as excused. If he divorces his wife, the divorce is in force, and if he commits a crime, he receives the punishment. But if it is not through ill choice, the divorce is not in force, neither does he receive punishment. And for example, even if an alcoholic is addicted to alcohol to the degree of necessity, he may not say, "It is a necessity and lawful for me." Thus, at this time, there are many matters which have reached the degree of necessity, and have taken on the form of a general calamity afflicting people, and which, since they have arisen from ill choice, illicit desires, forbidden acts, may not be the basis of ordinances permitting them and making what is unlawful lawful. However, since those who make interpretations at the present time make those necessities the basis of ordinances of the Sharia, their interpretations are earthly, the products of their own fancies, tainted by philosophy, and cannot be heavenly or revealed, or in accordance with the Sharia. However, if exercise of authority concerning the divine ordinances of the Creator of the heavens and the earth, and interference in the worship of his servants is without the Creator's permission, that exercise of authority and interference are rejected. For example, a number of the heedless and neglectful approve the changing of some of the marks of Islam, like the Friday sermon, and substituting the language of each country for Arabic, for two reasons. The first, so that in that way the mass of Muslims will understand current politics. But current politics has become so intermixed with lies and trickery and evil that it has become like the very whisperings of Satan. However, the pulpit is the seat of delivering divine revelation, so political rumours do not have the right to rise to that high position. The second, the Friday sermon is for understanding the admonitions of certain surahs of the Qur'an. Yes, if the majority of the Islamic nation conformed to the essential teachings and incontestable matters of Islam and the ordinances which are well known and carried them out, then the reading of the sermon in the known language and translation of the Qur'an. Footnote number 2. The 25th word about miraculousness has shown that a true translation of the Qur'an is not possible. If it was possible, might have been desirable in order to understand the theoretical matters of the Sharia and its subtle matters and abstruse teachings. But the well-known, incontrovertible ordinances of Islam, like the 5 daily prayers, fasting in Ramadan and zakat, and the unlawfulness of murder, fornication and wine are neglected. The ordinary people are not in need of learning their necessity or unlawfulness, but through encouragement and warning to be reminded of those sacred decrees, and through their sense of belief and feelings for Islam being stirred to be prompted, encouraged and reminded to conform to them. However lowly and ignorant they may be, they understand the following brief meaning from the Qur'an and Arabic sermon. The preacher and the reciter of the Qur'an are recalling the pillars of belief and Islam, which are known by me and everyone, and teaching us and reciting them. A longing for them is born in their hearts. What words are there in the universe which can be compared with the all-miraculous, instructive reminders, warnings and encouragement of the all-wise Qur'an, which comes from the sublime throne? The 6th. Since the great interpreters of the law among the righteous early generations of Islam lived close to the time of the companions of the Prophet, the age of light and age of truth, they were able to receive a pure light and make pure interpretations. But the interpreters of the law at this time look at the book of reality from behind so many veils and from such a long distance that they can see even its clearest letters only with difficulty. If you say, the companions also were human beings and not free of error and differences, while the meanings of interpretation of the law and the ordinances of the Sharia is the justice and truthfulness of the companions, on which the Islamic community have agreed, saying, all the companions were just and all spoke the truth. The answer, yes, the absolute majority of the companions of the Prophet were lovers of the truth, truthfulness and justice, for in that age the ugliness of lies and falsehood was shown in all its ugliness, and the beauty of right and truthfulness was shown in all its beauty in such a way that the distance between them stretched from the ground to the divine throne. There was a clear separation between them. From the depths of Musaylimah the liar at the lowest of the low to the degree of truthfulness of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, at the highest of the high. Indeed, just as it was lying that brought Musaylimah to the lowest of the low, so it was truthfulness and right which raised Muhammad the trustworthy to the highest of the high. Thus the companions who held elevated sentiments and worshipped good morals and were illuminated with the light of the conversation of the Son of Prophethood did not stretch out their hands to the buffoonery and filth of the lying of Musaylimah's shop, which was so ugly and the cause of dissent, and they shrank from unbelief. so too they shrank from lying, the companion of unbelief, and sought as far as they were able, especially in relating the ordinances of the Sharia and propagating them, truth, truthfulness and right, which are so fine, and the cause of pride and glory, ascent and progress, and were the thing most in demand from the elevated treasury of the glory of messengership, and which illuminate man's social life with their beauteous splendour. The companions acted in conformity with them, and were desirous of them. This is certain, definite and necessary. Whereas at this time, the distance between truth and lying has become so narrow that they are now quite simply shoulder to shoulder. It is extremely easy to pass from truthfulness to lying. Lying is even preferred to truthfulness due to the propaganda of politics and diplomacy. And so if the most ugly and the finest things are sold in the same shop for the same price, certainly the jewel of truthfulness and right, which is most elevated and penetrates to the essence of reality, will not be obtained blindly, relying on the word and skill of the shopkeeper. Conclusion. Sacred laws change according to the ages. Indeed, in one age different prophets may come, and they have come. Since subsequent to the seal of the prophets, his greater Sharia is sufficient for all peoples in every age. No need has remained for different laws. However, in secondary matters, the need for different schools has persisted to a degree, just as clothes change with the change of the seasons, and medicines change according to the dispositions. So sacred laws change according to the ages, and their ordinances change according to the capacities of peoples. Because the secondary matters of the ordinances of the Sharia look to human circumstances, they come according to them, and are like medicine. At the time of the early prophets, since social classes were far apart, and men's characters were both somewhat coarse and violent, and their minds primitive and close to nomadism, the laws at that time came all in different forms, appropriate to their conditions. There were even different prophets and laws in the same continent in the same century. Then, since with the coming of the prophet of the end of time, man as though advanced from the primary to the secondary stage, and through numerous revolutions and upheavals, reached a position at which all human peoples could receive a single lesson and listen to a single teacher and act in accordance with a single law. No need remained for different laws. Neither was there necessity for different teachers. But because they were not all at completely the same level and did not proceed in the same sort of social life, the schools of law became numerous. If, like students of a school of higher education, the vast majority of mankind were clothed in the same sort of social life and attained the same level, then all the schools could be united. But just as the state of the world does not permit that, so the schools of law cannot be the same. If you say, "The truth is one," how can the different ordinances of the 4 and 12 schools be true? The answer: the same water governs in 5 different ways in 5 ill people of different disposition. Thus, for one, the water is a cure for his illness, and according to medicine, necessary. For another, it is like poison for his sickness, and harmful, and medically prohibited. For another, it causes a small amount of harm, and is reprehensible medically. For another, the water is beneficial, and without harm, according to the medicine that is sunnah for him. And for yet another, it is neither harmful nor beneficial. He can drink it with good health, and for him it is medically permissible. Thus here the truth has become numerous. All 5 are true. Are you able to say the water is only a cure, only necessary, and it governs in no other way? Similarly, impelled by divine wisdom, the divine ordinances change according to the schools of law and those who follow them. And they change as truth, and all are true and right. For example, since in accordance with divine wisdom and determining, the majority of those who follow Imam Shafi are closer to village life and nomadism than the Hanafis, and lacking in social life, which makes the community like a single body. Each person recites the Fatiha behind the prayer leader so as to himself express his pains at the court of the dispenser of needs and utter his private wishes. And this is absolutely right and pure wisdom. However, since most Islamic governments favoured the school of Imam-i-Azam, the great majority of those who follow that school are closer to civilization and town life, and more fitted for social life. Thus the community becomes like a single individual, and one man speaks in the name of all. All affirm him with their hearts and bind their hearts to his, and his word becomes the word of all. According to the Hanafi school, the Fatiha is not recited behind the prayer leader, and its not being recited is absolutely right and pure wisdom. And for example, since through forming a barrier against the assaults of nature, the Sharia modifies it and trains the evil commanding soul according to the Shafi school, most of whose followers are villagers, semi-nomadic, occupied in manual labour. Ablutions are spoiled by touching a woman. The slightest uncleanness is harmful. While, according to the Hanafi school, since the great majority of its followers have entered social life and become semi-civilized, touching women does not spoil the ablutions. There is license for a small amount of uncleanliness. Now we shall consider a manual worker and a gentleman. Due to his craft and the manner of his livelihood, a worker is afflicted with mixing with and being in contact with women who are canonically strangers to him. Since he sits at the same hearth as them and is involved with unclean things, nature and his evil commanding soul find the field empty and may attack him. Therefore, in order to form a barrier against such attacks, the Sharia states concerning them, "Your ablutions will be spoilt, do not touch the women. Your prayers will be invalid, do not be tainted." A heavenly voice rings in his spiritual ears, whereas, in accordance with social custom, and in the name of common morality, the gentleman, on condition he is honourable, is not afflicted with being in contact with women who are not canonically strangers to him. And in the name of cleanliness of civilization, he is not tainted to any degree with unclean things. Therefore, in the Hanafi school, the Sharia has not shown him harshness and censure. It has shown its permissive side and lightened it. If your hand has been touched, your ablutions are not spoilt. If you are ashamed and do not perform the istinja in public, there is no harm in it. A small amount of uncleanness is permitted. It saves him from scruples. Thus, 2 drops from the ocean as examples for you. Make analogies with them. And if you can, balance them on the scales of Sharia in this way, with the balance of Sha'rani's Mizam.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم صل وسلم على من تمثل فيه أنوار محبتك لجمال صفاتك وأسمائك بكونه مرآة جامعة لتجليات أسمائك الحسنى ومن تمركز فيه شعاعات محبتك لصنعتك في مصنوعاتك بكونه أكمل وأبدع مصنوعاتك وسيرورته أنموذج كمالات صنعتك وفهرستة محاسن نقوشك ومن تظاهر فيه لطائف محبتك ورغبتك لاستحسان صنعتك بكونه أعلى دلالين محاسن صنعتك وأرفع المستحسنين صوتا في إعلان حسن نقوشك وأبدعهم نعتا لكمالات صنعتك ومن تجمع فيه أقسام محبتك واستحسانك لمحاسن أخلاق مخلوقاتك ولطائف أوصاف مصنوعاتك بكونه جامعا لمحاسن الأخلاق كافة بإحسانك ولطائف الأوصاف قاطبة بفضلك ومن صار مصداقا صادقا ومقياسا فائقا لجميع من ذكرت في فرقانك إنك تحبهم من المحسنين والصابرين والمؤمنين والمتقين والتوابين والأوابين وجميع الأصناف الذين أحببتهم وشرفتهم بمحبتك في فرقانك حتى صار إمام الحبيبين لك وسيد المحبوبين لك والرئيس أبدائك وعلى آله وأصحابه وإخوانه أجمعين آمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
Glory be unto you. We have no knowledge save that which you have taught us. Indeed, you are all-knowing, all-wise. O Allah, grant blessings and peace to the one in whom were embodied the lights of your love through the beauty of your attributes, the comprehensive mirror to the manifestations of your most beautiful names, in whom was focused the rays of your love for the art which is in your creatures, the most perfect and wonderful of your artifacts, who was a sample of the perfections of your art and an index of the beauties of your inscriptions, and who reflected the subtleties of your love and your desire that your art be appreciated, the most elevated herald of your fine art, who proclaimed in resounding voice admiration for the beauty of your inscriptions, the most wonderful praiser of the perfections of your art, who reflected together in his being the varieties of your love and your appreciation for the good morals of your creatures and the subtleties of your artifacts' qualities, comprehending all fine conduct and good morality through your favour and the subtleties of commendable attributes through your grace, who is the most excellent criterion and measure of everything you mention in your criterion of truth and falsehood, the Qur'an, those whom you love from among the righteous, the patient, the believers, those who fear you, who turn to you, and who repent, and all the classes of those whom you infuse with life and honour through your love in your criterion of truth and falsehood, until they become as the leader of those whom you love, the master of those beloved by you, and chief of your beloveds, and grant blessings and peace to all his family and companions and brothers. Amen. Through your mercy, O most merciful of the merciful. Addendum to the 27th word, on the companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Like Maulana Jami, I say, O Messenger of Allah, if only like the dog of the companions of the cave, I could be in paradise among your companions. Is it right that their dog is in paradise while I am in hell? He was the dog of those companions. I am the dog of yours.
Bismihi subhanahu wa in min shay'in illa yusabbihu bihamdi. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Muhammadur Rasulullah. وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُمْ.
In his name be he glorified, and there is nothing but it glorifies him with praise. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and those who are with him are strong against the unbelievers, but compassionate amongst each other. You ask, there are some narrations which say, at a time when innovations are rife, some of the righteous from among the believers and those who fear Allah will be on a level with the companions, or of even greater virtue, Are these narrations sound? And if so, what is their true meaning? The answer: the consensus of the Sunnis, the Ahl-Sunnah wal Jamaat, that after the prophets, the most virtuous of mankind are the companions, is a certain proof that those that are sound out of those narrations refer to minor virtues. For in minor virtues and particular perfections, a quality may be deemed preferable to that which is superior and in fact preferable. But from the point of view of general virtue, the companions cannot be reached, who are the subject of divine praise at the end of Surah Al-Fath, and are praised and applauded in the Torah, Gospels and Qur'an. For now, we shall explain 3 points of wisdom concerning this truth, which comprise 3 reasons out of very many reasons and instances of wisdom. First instance of wisdom. The conversation of the Prophet was such an elixir that someone who experienced it for 1 minute received lights of reality equivalent to years of spiritual journeying. For in conversation there is reflection and a being coloured. It is well known that through reflection and following and imitating, and through the sublime light of prophethood, a truly exalted level may be reached. Like through allegiance to his sovereign and following him, a sultan's servant may rise to a position so high a king cannot rise to it. It is due to this mystery that the greatest saints cannot reach the level of the companions. Even saints like Jalaluddin Suyuti, who conversed many times with Allah's noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, while awake, even if they do this and are honoured in this world with his company, they still cannot reach the companions. For through the light of Muhammad's, peace and blessings be upon him's prophethood, the companions' conversation was with him as prophet, while the saints saw him, peace and blessings be upon him, after his death, and conversed with him, peace and blessings be upon him, through the light of his sainthood. That is to say, the personification and appearance of Allah's noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, is in respect of his sainthood, not in regard to his prophethood. Since that is so, however much higher the level of prophethood is to that of sainthood, one should differentiate between the 2 conversations to that degree. Just how luminous an elixir was the Prophet's company may be understood through the following. A primitive man, so hard-hearted and savage he buried his daughter alive, would not come and be honoured with the conversation of the Prophet for an hour, and would acquire such kindness and compassion that he would not step on an ant. A primitive man, so hard-hearted and savage he buried his daughter alive, would come and be honoured with the conversation of the Prophet for an hour, and would acquire such kindness and compassion that he would not step on an ant. And an ignorant savage would converse with the Prophet for a day, then go to lands like China and India, and instruct civilized people in the realities and guide them in perfections. Second reason, as is explained and proved in the discussion of interpretation of the law in the 27th word, the vast majority of the companions were at the highest level of human perfections. For at that time, in the mighty revolution of Islam, good and truth appeared in all their beauty, and evil and falsehood in all their ugliness, and they were felt physically. Such a difference was apparent between good and evil, and such distance opened up between truth and falsehood, that they drew as distant from one another as belief is from unbelief, and even hell is from paradise. The companions, who by nature possessed elevated emotions, were captivated by the highest morality and inclined towards dignity and virtue, would not voluntarily stretch out their hands to evil and falsehood, and so fall to the level of Musaylama the liar and his ridiculous utterances. For he was the herald of falsehood, evil and lies and their embodiment. Their characters demanded that they looked to the rank of the perfections, those of Allah's beloved, peace and blessings be upon him, at the highest of the high, who was the herald and embodiment of truthfulness, good and right, and that they hastened in that way with all their strength and endeavour. For example, it sometimes happens that in the market of human civilization and shop of social life, everyone flees in disgust from the fearsome results and ugly consequences of certain things, like from a deadly poison, let alone buying them, while the beautiful results and valuable consequences of certain other things and of immaterial goods attract the general view and demand to themselves, like a universal panacea and a sparkling brilliant, everyone tries their utmost to buy them. In just the same way, in the era of bliss in the market of human social life, since goods like lying, evil, and unbelief gave rise to results like everlasting misery, and base buffoons like Merciful the liar, it is certain and clear that the companions, who were captivated by the elevated characteristics and love of exalted things, would flee from them with loathing as from fatal poison. And of a necessity, the companions, with their pure natures and praiseworthy characteristics, would, with all their strength, emotions, and faculties, be desirous of and customers for truth, truthfulness, and belief, which yielded results like eternal happiness and luminous fruits like Allah's noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, as though for the most effective panacea and precious diamond. However, after that time the distance between truthfulness and lying has gradually and by degrees diminished, until they have become shoulder to shoulder, having begun to be sold together in the same shop. Social morality has become corrupted. The propaganda of politics has caused greater demand for lying, at a time when the awesome ugliness of lying has begun to become concealed and the shining beauty of truthfulness has begun not to be apparent. Who can contain to the strength, constancy, and taqwa of the companions in the matters of justice, truthfulness, exaltedness, and right, or surpass their level? I shall explain something which occurred to me, which will illuminate this to a degree. It was like this. One time it occurred to me, why could wondrous individuals like Muhyiddin al-Arabi not attain to the levels of the companions? Then, while saying,
Subhana Rabbiyal A'la,
Glory be to my Sustainer, the Most High, during the prayers, the meaning of the phrase was unfolded to me. Not in its complete meaning, but its reality in part became apparent to me. I said in my heart, if only I could perform one of the 5 daily prayers in the same way as this pray. If only I could perform one of the 5 daily prayers in the same way as this phrase, it would be better than a year's worship. After the prayers, I understood that thought and state was guidance, indicating that the companions' degree in worship could not be reached. In that mighty social revolution brought about by the lights of the Qur'an, while opposites were separated from one another, and evils together with all their darkness, details, and all who followed them, and good and perfections together with all their lights, and results came face to face. At such an exciting time, all glorifications of Allah and recitations of His names expressed all the levels of their meanings freshly and newly, and in a young and unfaded fashion. So too, under the crashing of that mighty revolution, all the senses and subtle inner faculties of people were awakened. Even senses like those of fancy and imagination, awakened and aware state, received the numerous meanings of those recitations and glorifications in accordance with their own perceptions and absorbed them. Thus, due to this wisdom, when the companions whose senses were awakened and subtle faculties alert uttered those blessed words comprising the lights of belief and glorification, they did so in all their meaning, and they partook of them with all their senses. However, after that revolution and upheaval, the subtle faculties have gradually sunk into sleep, and the senses fallen from that point of realities into heedlessness. Like fruits under the veil of familiarity, those blessed words have gradually lost their delicacy and freshness. Similarly, as though drying up through the air of superficiality, only a little freshness remains, and this may be restored to its former state only through drastic surgery of a reflective and reasoning kind. Thus, it is because of this that another can reach the virtue and level the companions attained to in 40 minutes, only in 40 years. Third reason. As is proved in the 12th, 24th and 25th words, the comparison of prophethood and sainthood is that of the sun itself and the sun's image as it appears in mirrors. Thus, however much higher the sphere of prophethood is than that of sainthood, the servants of the sphere of prophethood and the companions, the stars of that sun, have to be superior to the righteous in the sphere of sainthood to the same degree. The legacy of prophethood and veracity, which is the supreme sainthood, is the sainthood of the companions. Even if a saint attains to this, he still cannot reach the level of the companions, the first rank. We shall explain 3 out of the numerous aspects of this third reason. First aspect, the companions cannot be reached in the interpretation of the law, that is, in deducing its ordinances, that is, in understanding what pleases Almighty Allah from His word. Because that mighty divine revolution revolved on understanding the dominical wishes and divine ordinances, all minds were turned towards deducing the divine ordinances. All hearts were eager to know, what does our Sustainer want from us? All that happened at that time did so in a way that made this known and understood. The discussions of the time concerned them. Thus, since everything and all situations and discussions and conversations and stories occurred in such a way as to give us some sort of instruction in these meanings, and since this perfected the companions' capacities and illuminated their minds, and since their ability to interpret the law and deduce its ordinances was ready to be lit up like a match, someone at this time, with the intelligence and capacity of the companions, could not reach in 10 years or perhaps in 100 the level of deduction and interpretation they reached in a day or a month. Because now worldly happiness is the focus of attention in the place of eternal happiness, mankind's attention and view is directed towards different goals. Since the struggle for livelihood, together with lack of reliance on Allah, has bewildered man's spirit, and naturalist and materialist philosophies have blinded his intellect. Just as the social environment does not strengthen a person's mind and capacity in the matter of interpreting the divine law, so it confuses and scatters them. We proved in the discussion on the interpretation of the law in the 27th word in the comparison between Sufyan ibn Uyayna and someone of his intelligence today, that the other person could not acquire in 100 years what Sufyan acquired in 10. In the second aspect, the level of the companions in closeness to Allah cannot be attained with the feat of sainthood. For Almighty Allah is infinitely close to us, closer to us than everything, but we are infinitely distant from Him. Divine proximity may be gained in 2 ways. The first is through the unfolding of divine immediacy, to which the divine proximity in prophethood looks, and which the companions manifested through the legacy of prophethood and conversation of the Prophet. The second way is to traverse the degrees of our distance from Allah and be honoured with divine proximity to an extent. Most of the spiritual voyaging of sainthood is according to this, and illumination through the self and through the outside world proceeds in this way. Thus, the first way is purely given. It is not acquired. It is attraction, the drawing of the most merciful one, and it is being loved by Him. The path is short, but very severe, very elevated, very pure, and without shadow. The other is acquired long and in shadow. Even if its strange wonders are many, it cannot reach the first in regard to quality and divine proximity. For example, there are two ways of reaching yesterday. The first is not to be subject to the course of time. Through a sacred power, it is to rise above time and see yesterday as present like today. The second is to traverse the distance of a year to travel and turn and come to yesterday. But still yesterday cannot be held. It leaves the person and departs in just the same way. There are two ways of passing from the apparent to reality. The first is to be carried away directly on the attraction of reality, and without entering the intermediate realm of the Sufi way, to find reality within the apparent itself. The second is to pass through many levels through spiritual journeying. For sure, the saints are successful in annihilating the soul and kill the evil commanding soul, but they still cannot reach the companions, because since the companions' souls had been purified and cleansed through the many faculties within the soul, they manifested to a greater degree the varieties of worship and thanks and praise. After the soul has been annihilated, the worship of the saints acquires a simpleness and plainness. The third aspect, the companions cannot be reached in regard to virtuous actions and good deeds pertaining to the hereafter. Because just as in certain conditions, in a frightening and important post, a soldier may gain in 1 hour's watch the virtue of a year's worship, and by being hit by a bullet may rise in 1 minute to a station similar to a degree of sainthood, which can only be gained in at least 40 years. So too the companion service in the establishment of Islam and propagating the decrees of the Qur'an and their declaring war on the whole world for Islam were so elevated that others cannot reach 1 minute of it in a year. It may even be said that in the sacred service all their minutes were like that 1 minute of the martyred soldier. All their hours were like the 1 hour's watch of a faithful soldier in some terrifying post in which the acts are few, but the recompense great and value high. Indeed, since the companions formed the first rank in the establishment of Islam and spreading of the lights of the Qur'an in accordance with the rule,
السبب كالفاعل.
The cause is like the doer. A share of all the good works of all the Islamic community passes to them. The Islamic community saying,
Allahümme salli ala seyyidina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve ashabi.
O Allah, grant blessings to our Master Muhammad and to his family and companions, shows that the companions receive a share of the good works of their whole community. Furthermore, just as an insignificant characteristic in the root of a tree takes on a large form in the tree's branches, and is larger than the largest branch, and just as a small protuberance at the beginning gradually forms a mass, and just as an excess the size of a needle point at a central point may become more than a metre at the circumference of the circle. Just like these four examples, since the companions were from the roots and foundations of the luminous tree of Islam, and were at the beginning of luminous lines of the structure of Islam, and were from among the leaders of the Islamic community, and were the first of their number, and since they were close to the centre of the Sun of Prophethood and lamp of reality, a few of their actions were many, and their small acts of service great. To reach their level necessitates being a true companion.
Allahümme salli ala seyyidina Muhammedin illezi qâle ashabi ken nucûm bi eyyihim iqtedeytum ihtedeytum ve hayrul kuruni karni ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ve sellim. Subhaneke la ilme lena illa ma allamtana inneke entel alimul hakim.
O Allah, grant blessings to our Master Muhammad, who said, "My companions are like the stars, Whichever of them you follow, you will be rightly guided. And the best of centuries is my century. And to his family and companions, and grant them peace. Glory be unto you. We have no knowledge save that which you have taught us. Indeed, you are all-knowing, all-wise. Question. It is said, the companions saw Allah's noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him. Then they believed. However, we have believed without seeing him, in which case our belief is stronger. Also, there are narrations mentioning the strength of our belief, are there not? The answer. At that time, when all ideas were opposed and hostile to the truths of Islam, the companions believed so strongly, sometimes only seeing the person of Allah's noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, and without miracles, that all the generally held ideas in the world did not shake them, let alone doubts. They did not even cause some of them the slightest anxiety or scruple. You are comparing your belief with that of the companions, but how can there be any comparison? For despite your seeing with the mind's eye, not the messenger's peace and blessings be upon him's humanity and bodily form, which was the seed of the tuber tree of his prophethood, but through all the lights of Islam and the truths of the Qur'an, his luminous, magnificent collective personality, encompassed by 1,000 miracles, you waver and fall into doubt at the word of a European philosopher. Yet due to their belief, the companions did not waver in the face of the attacks of the entire world of unbelief and of the Christians, Jews and philosophers. How can you compare the intense fear of Allah, of the companions, and their complete righteousness, which demonstrated the strength of their belief and proceeded from it, and your dull belief, which, due to your extreme weakness, does not impel you to perform even the obligatory practices completely? O you who make such a claim, however the hadith, the meaning of which is, those at the end of time who do not see me and believe are more acceptable, refers to particular virtues. It concerns certain special individuals. Our discussion, however, is in regard to general virtue and the majority. Second question. They say that the saints and possessors of perfection abandoned the world. It even says in a hadith, love of this world is the source of all error. Whereas the companions were very involved in the world. It was not abandoning the world. Some of them were ahead of the civilized of that time even. How is it that you say that even the least of such companions was greater worth than the greatest saint? The answer. It has been proved decisively in the second and third stopping places of the 32nd word that to love the face of the world which looks to the hereafter and that which looks to the divine names is not the cause of loss, but the means to perfection and attainment. And however far one goes in those two faces, the further one goes in worship and knowledge of Allah. The world of the companions was in those two faces. They saw this world as the arable field of the hereafter, and sowed and reaped it. They saw beings as the mirrors of divine names, and gazed on them yearningly. As for the transience of the world, that is its transitory face. As for the transience of the world, that is its transitory face, which looks to man's base desires. Third question. The Sufi paths are the ways of reality. Some of the heroes and leaders of the Naqshbandi order, which is claimed to be the most famous, the most elevated, and the highway among the Sufi ways, defined its basis as follows. They said, on the Naqshbandi way, 4 abandonings are necessary: abandoning the world, abandoning the hereafter, abandoning existence, and abandoning. That is to say, on the Naqshi way, one has to give up 4 things: both give up this world, and on account of the soul, not to make even the hereafter one's true aim, forget one's existence, and in order not to become vain and proud, not to think about these acts of renunciation. That means true knowledge of Allah and human perfection are attained through giving up what is other than Allah. The answer: if man consisted of only a heart, it would be necessary to give up everything other than Allah, and to leave behind even the divine names and attributes, and bind one's heart to the divine essence alone. But man possesses many senses and subtle faculties charged with duties, like the mind, spirit, soul, and others. The perfect man is he who, driving all the subtle senses towards reality on the different ways of worship particular to them, marches heroically like the companions in a broad arena in rich fashion towards the goal, with the heart as commander and the subtle faculties as soldiers. For the heart to abandon its soldiers in order to save only itself and to proceed on its own is the cause not of pride but of distress. Fourth question: where does the claim of the companions' superiority spring from, and who put it forward? Why should this matter be made the subject of discussion at this time? Also, why is there this claim of equality with the great interpreters of the law? The answer: there are two groups who say these things. Some are the sincere religious scholars and men of religion who, seeing certain hadiths, open up such discussions in order to encourage and hearten the pious and the upright at this time. We do not have anything to say to them. They are anyway few and are quickly made aware. The other group, however, consists of most fearsome, conceited people who want to spread their denial of the schools of law by claiming equality with the great interpreters of the law, and to further their irreligion by claiming equality with their companions. Because firstly, those people of misguidance have become depraved and have become addicted to depravity, and cannot carry out the obligations of the Sharia, since they form an obstacle to their depravity. In order to find a pretext for themselves, they say these questions may be interpreted. The schools of law are opposed to each other in these matters, and the interpreters of the law were human beings like us, and may have made mistakes, in which case, like them, we shall interpret the divine law and perform our worship as we wish. Why should we be compelled to follow them? Thus, due to these satanic wiles, these wretches put themselves outside the fold of the schools of law. It is demonstrated clearly in the 27th word just how baseless and rotten these claims are, so we refer you to that. Secondly, that group of the people of misguidance saw that the matter does not end with the interpretations of the law, for what lay on their shoulders were only the theoretical matters of religion, whereas this group wants to give up and change the essential teachings of religion. If they say we are better than them, the matter does not finish there. For interpreters of the law may interfere in theoretical matters and in secondary matters which are not categorical. But these people of misguidance, who follow no school of law, want to mix their ideas in the essentials of religion as well, and to change matters which are not capable of being changed, and to oppose the incontrovertible pillars of Islam. And so they are bound to attack the companions, who are the bearers and supports of the essentials of religion. Alas, it has been proved decisively in the 27th word that not animals in human form like them, but true human beings, and the greatest of the saints even, who are the most perfect of true human beings, cannot win the case claiming equality with the least of the companions.
Allahümme salli ve sellim ala rasulikellezi qala La tesubbu ashabi lev enfeqa ahadukum misle uhudin zeheben ma belaga nisfe muddin min ashabi sadaka Rasulullah Subhaneke la ilme lena illa ma allamtana inneke entel alimul hakim.
O Allah, grant blessings and peace to your messenger who said, Do not insult my companions, by the one in whose hand is myself. If one of you were to spend the gold equivalent to Mount Uhud, he could not attain to the equivalent of 2 handfuls that one of them spent, or even half of that. The 28th word. This word is about paradise and consists of 2 stations. The first indicates some of the subtle wonders of paradise. However, it does not prove the existence of paradise, since this has been proved in brilliant fashion by the 12 decisive truths of the 10th word and by the firm and clear consecutive arguments in Arabic which form the basis and summary of the 10th word and the second station of this word. This station discusses in question and answer form a number of the aspects of paradise which have been the cause of criticism. If divine assistance is forthcoming, a great word will later be written about that mighty truth, Allah willing.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا مِنْهَا مِنْ ثَمَرَةٍ رِزْقًا قَالُوا هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقْنَا مِنْ قَبْلُ وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ.
In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate, and give glad tidings to those who believe and act righteously, that theirs shall be gardens beneath which flow rivers. Every time they are fed with fruits therefrom, they will say, "Why, this is what we were fed with before." For they will be given things in similitude, and they shall have therein spouses pure, and shall abide there forever. The brief answers to a number of questions about eternal paradise. The descriptions of the Qur'an's verses about paradise, which are more beautiful than paradise, more lovely than the Houris, and sweeter than the water of Salsabil, leave nothing to be said about it, so that anyone should say it. However, in order to bring closer to the understanding those shining, pre-eternal, post-eternal, elevated and exquisite verses, we shall mention a number of steps, and as samples of that Quranic paradise, a number of fine points which are like samples of its flowers. We shall point to these through 5 elusive questions and answers. Indeed, paradise is the means both to all spiritual and non-physical pleasures, and to all physical pleasures. Question: what connection with eternity and paradise has faulty, deficient, changing, unstable, and suffering corporeality? Since the spirit has elevated pleasures, that is sufficient. Why is bodily resurrection necessary for bodily pleasures? The answer: because just as in relation to water, air, and light, earth is dense and dark, but since it is the source and means of all the varieties of divine artifacts, in meaning it rises above the other elements, and just as in regard to the mystery of its comprehensiveness, and on condition it is purified, the human soul, which is also dense, rises above all the other human subtle faculties. So too, corporeality is the richest and most comprehensive and all-embracing mirror to the manifestation of the divine names. All the tools and instruments for measuring the contents of the treasuries of mercy and reckoning their balances lie in corporeality. For example, if scales to the number of sorts of food and their pleasures did not originate in the sense of taste in the tongue, it could not taste and weigh them all up, and recognize and experience them. Also, the instruments for experiencing and knowing the manifestations of the most divine names, and tasting and recognizing them, again lie in corporeality. And the faculties for experiencing all the infinitely various pleasures are also in corporeality. As is proved in the 11th word, it is understood clearly from the disposition of the universe and man's comprehensiveness that the universe's maker wants to make known all the treasuries of his mercy and all the manifestations of his names, and to make experienced all the varieties of his bounties. The abode of bliss, therefore, which is a vast pool formed from the flood of the universe, and a great exhibition of the textiles woven on the loom of the universe, and an everlasting store of the crops produced in the arable field of this world, will resemble the universe to a degree, and it will preserve all its fundamental matters, both corporal and spiritual. Its all-wise Maker, the most compassionate one, will also give us recompense for the duties of the physical tools and instruments, pleasures worthy of them, and to his servants, as a wage and reward for the particular worship of each. Otherwise, a situation would occur that was contrary to his wisdom, justice, and mercy, which is in no way fitting for the beauty of his mercy and perfection of his justice, and in no way compatible with them. Question: if a body is living, its parts are constantly being formed and dissolved. It is doomed to extinction and cannot be eternal. Eating and drinking are for the perpetuation of the individual, and sexual relations are for the perpetuation of the species. These are fundamental to this world, but there is no need for them in the world of eternity and hereafter. So why are they among the greatest pleasures of paradise? The answer: firstly, the bodies of living creatures are doomed to annihilation and death in this world, because of an imbalance between what is taken in and what is expended. From childhood until maturity, much is taken in, and after that what is expended increases. The balance is spoilt, and the body dies. In the world of eternity, however, the particles of the body remain constant and are not subject to composition and dissolution, or else the balance remains constant. Footnote number 2. In this world, the bodies of humans and animals are like guest houses, barracks, and schools for particles. The lifeless particles enter them and acquire worthiness to be particles for the everlasting realm, which is living. Then they leave them. In the hereafter, however, according to the verse,
إِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ,
the abode of the hereafter, that is life indeed. The light of life is general. There is no necessity for the travelling, drill, and instruction in order to be illuminated. Particles will remain constant as permanent fixtures. Like a closed circle or perpetual motion, the body of the living creature becomes eternal together with the functioning of the machine of the bodily life for pleasure. Although in this world eating and drinking and sexual relations arise from need and perform a function, various delights and pleasures have been placed within them as an immediate wage for the duty performed, and these are superior to other pleasures. Since in this abode of sorrows, eating and sexual relations are the means to so many wonderful and various pleasures. Certainly in paradise, which is the abode of pleasure and bliss, those pleasures will take on sublime form. The recompense of the duties pertaining to the hereafter performed here will also be added to them as pleasure, and they will be augmented by worldly needs, which have taken the form of agreeable, otherworldly appetites, so will become an all-embracing, living source of pleasure worthy of paradise and suitable to eternity. Indeed, according to the meaning of the verse,
وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَهْوٌ وَلَعِبٌ وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ.
And what is the life of this world but amusement and play? But indeed, the abode of the hereafter, that is life indeed. Substances, matters, which are inanimate and without consciousness, and life in the abode of this world, there will be living and conscious. Like human beings and animals here, the trees and stones there will understand commands and carry them out. If you tell a tree to bring you such and such a fruit, it will bring it. And if you tell such and such a stone to come, it will come. Since stones and trees will take on this elevated form, it surely necessitates that, together with preserving their bodily realities, eating, drinking, and sexual relations will also take on a form higher than their worldly form, higher to the degree that paradise is higher than this world.